Do they ever lower the price in the future?
It's very rare that they're going to lower the price.
Boom. How do you like that? Price raise, prices. So how do you kind of shield yourself?
You should also always have a backup option.
Okay.
You know.
Hey guys, how's it going? Nick is here as always, and today I have two of my friends, Mike and Rico. Cumulatively, they've lived in China over 13 years. And today we're going to be talking about price negotiations with your factories, and how to properly do it, and what to expect. Gentlemen, as you both know, recently I have visited some new factories and I got some new prices. And here's the case that I think has played out previously for many people. And I'll tell you my personal story and maybe you can give me some feedback on it. So I went to a new factory, or let's say I contacted a new factory via Alibaba. Everything's good, the process is set in place. The price that they quoted me originally kind of stands. Let's say it's 2 RMB, right? 2 RMB per product. And then once we agree on everything, I'm about to go visit the factory. Let's say I have a sourcing agent visit my factory for me. And just as that happens, they raise the price from 2 to 2.5 RMB. And you ask them, hey, what's going on? Why'd you do that? Oh, it's because we have to raise it by 0.25 RMB, let's say, or 0.025 RMB because of labor costs and tax. And they give you a ton of excuses. What does that actually mean? And is there a way to counteract that to come back to the original price?
It depends. Maybe they didn't look deep enough into what it would actually cost until you were ready to place that order.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll just quote based off an estimate.
Okay.
Their engineer looking at the sample, but when they dive deeper into the production process, they have a better understanding of what it's going to take to make that. Plus, they weigh it up with their current production schedule, what they're working on, how they have to allot resources. Potentially you need more workers to complete your product, so they have to import those workers from a neighboring factory to help them. There's a lot of different factors that could cause the raise of that price. There's also a good chance that they won't tell you actually what it is. That's common. That's happened to us quite a bit in China, last minute price raises.
How do you guys differentiate or kind of recognize the difference between just kind of a bullshit price raise where they're like, oh, let's just try it. If we get away with it, we get away with it, versus an actual price raise? We
try to have factories really break down the cost of the order, because costs come at different levels of production, materials, labor, packaging, all these different aspects. And some factories won't do that for you, some orders, but sometimes they will, and it really helps to understand how the price is determined.
Yeah. Do you think that it's a good idea to challenge that, to try and kind of fight over the price raise?
I think it depends. It depends. I always say, well, it depends on how big of a price difference it is for you. But I think it's important, if it's an issue for you, if it seems strange, if it's last minute, I think it's important to bring up the problem.
Yeah.
Because just off of the simple fact that you don't want to set a precedent where they feel comfortable to do that to you on a regular basis. So if we're talking about 0.1 cents and you're it's not that big of a deal, it's still important for you to bring it up, just so that they know that they can't just do this to you anytime they want to increase the price.
Yeah.
And understanding their logic for why it happened can also save you in the future if they're trying to manipulate the price.
What do you mean by
something's
understanding their logic?
Just where did the increase in cost come? I've seen factories oftentimes bump prices up on multiple occasions, and they'll contradict what they said from a previous time of why the price went up, and that can help you.
Yeah. Do you have an example from the past of what was contradicted?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
I'll think about it.
Okay.
What I think about is the exchange rate. Sometimes factories will use their own exchange rate.
Yeah, definitely.
So if you got a quote in, let's say you're in China, so you get a quote in RMB.
Yeah.
And then now you're getting ready to move forward with the factory, and then you're asking them for the USD quote, and then the USD quote is significantly more than what you calculated, because you were using the actual exchange rate.
Especially when there's been a recent rate shift.
Yeah, they're using their own personal exchange rate. This happens with our freight forwarder. I had an argument with our freight forwarder last week, where I calculated the RMB cost that he gave me. I can pay him in RMB as well, so I was Okay, so I calculated the RMB cost, and I looked at the USD quote that he gave me, and then I looked at the exchange rate for that day, and it was like $100 difference based on what he was, based on what they calculated. I was like, dude, like, how is this possible? And he's like, oh, you know, my finance department gave me this, and I was like, I'm not paying that. I'll pay you in RMB then.
So do you think that that's a good idea to just get quotes in RMB, so that they are working on their?
If you have the ability to send.
Well, the thing is, like,
RMB,
when you do a wire transfer from U.S. bank account or
Right.
whichever Canadian or European bank account to a Chinese bank account,
You
right?
cannot pay them.
Does
in
it
RMB.
not auto translate into RMB right away?
No.
No,
They receive it in
USD.
USD, and then they need to physically go to the bank and convert it from USD
for a
into
Chinese
RMB.
company.
And
Maybe they have a Hong Kong-based company. A lot of
Yeah.
suppliers in South China, Shenzhen, Dongguan, Guangzhou will have Hong Kong companies that they can accept money in.
So how do you normally make the conversion so that they receive it in RMB?
You have to have a Chinese bank account. You can't pay RMB into China from outside of China.
how about with TransferWise now? Is that an option?
pretty
It doesn't
Even
convert
with
for you?
TransferWise probably has a Chinese bank account.
Right,
Like that's the only
right.
way they can
Yeah,
do it.
but they send money to RMB, like in RMB transfer wise.
Eventually,
Eventually,
once
but
it's
but
changed
they're sending
They're gonna
basically
take-
you're
they're
transferring
gonna take
to
their
TransferWise's
percentages.
US exactly. So you're transferring to TransferWise's USD account in the US, and then they're taking money from their RMB account and transferring.
But
it to
that's
the
a
bank.
way to do it.
That's a way to do it. Some factories won't accept that though,
Why not?
because
They
it's
re-
just
Sorry, I was going to say they recently also made it much harder to accept PayPal payments into a Chinese bank account.
Yeah. So I guess back to the price raises. So your advice is like determine whether it's a meaningful amount to you or not, and how do you protect yourself from them doing that over and over? Because I think the big fear here is not necessarily like a one-off order price raise, but in my case, for example, with my previous factory that I've worked with for 2 years plus, is the constant price raise. No matter what you do, no matter how you do it, it's just price raise, prices. So how do you kind of shield yourself from that? Like, do you have another factory that you just like basically, hey, listen, if one more price raise happens, we're walking away? Like,
You
this
should
is
also always have a backup option.
Okay.
You know, what if your production ramps up tenfold and the current factory can't keep up with that? You know, you need to have a backup option. Maybe something bad happens with the factory and you need to transition. I think that's one important way. But then also always having a idea of your margins in line. You know, if they're getting dangerously close to the point where you're like, hey, I'm not going to make money if this price goes up anymore, then that's a sign that you either need to set a contract with them to hit some type of rate. Maybe you need to look elsewhere for production. That's the way you can combat it.
I told you this before. It's like just sign a contract for a year, stipulating what the per unit cost is, and then you can have. Because what they're going to say,
they might even try to break that.
they might try to break that, but they'll probably argue and say, well, you know, like, what about the conversion rates? And you can say, like, if it goes up by X percentage, like let's say 3%, which is like a normal amount, if it goes up or it goes down by 3%, then you're readjusting the per unit cost. I feel like that's the safest way to do it.
Do contracts matter? A podcast by SourceFind Asia, and a link down below. Boom. How do you like that? So you create a contract with them, right? So I think there's like two things. So there's the contract for like a yearly, basically like, hey, we're gonna have this price unless like 3% goes up or down in terms of currency fluctuation.
Currency or labor.
Or labor or anything
You'll
like
have to
that.
sit down with them and discuss all the factors.
Yeah, so then those are the kind of things that I don't think I thought about when I was first starting, when I was just using Alibaba to find a supplier. Like, it didn't even like clue into me to do these kind of contracts. So
you don't have to, though, to be honest. Like, I mean, this is only stuff that I started thinking about when you start to get to like the 6-figure range in orders and like, you know.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's like, you agree on a certain price, and then they make the samples. They send you the samples. It's like, okay, they saw what it's like to go through producing this kind of, this kind of product.
Production of a sample in large production, full-scale production is much different in terms of cost.
So even like the day before, they can still kind of change it up when you just say like, hey, it's actually going to be like 10% higher.
Yeah, I mean, it might actually be 10% higher for them. They might also think, hey, this guy now needs the product, so we're going to jack the price up.
Yeah.
Do they ever lower the price in the future? Like, does that ever happen? Because I haven't heard that happen ever.
It's very rare that they're going to lower the price, but anytime they've lowered the price, we were the ones that
Yeah, I was
prompted
about
that.
to say, when you press them,
Yeah,
and you point out,
Yeah.
hey, we've contacted 4 other factories about this exact product. We've gone into deep detail, and they've all hit a price range that's 10-15% lower than yours.
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it?
Well, I mean,
That's a way to get down the
I
price.
told you that story before. Is like with our, I even talk about with our toy client, like Prodigy. We produced in total 9 different designs for them.
Yeah.
So we'd done 4 or 5 by the end of 2016, and we knew that the pre-unit cost was higher because we'd gotten quotes from other factories before. But it was just now getting to a stage where it's like now you have 5 products and all of them are overpriced. So our client was like, "Oh, you guys, can you go and like contact the factories we spoke to before and talk to a couple new ones, send them samples, get quotations." And yeah, all of the factories quoted us like it was at least 50% cheaper per unit. And we just went to our factory and said, "Look, these are the prices we got. These are direct competitors with you guys, like similar size factories. What are you gonna do?" And then we negotiated it down to 30% lower. Well, 30% lower. We didn't press them all the way because at the end of the day, you're also paying for the, like I said in the previous video, you're paying for the quality, you're paying for the relationship as well. If you press them all the way down,
the cheapest is not the best.
Yeah, cheap is expensive. It's like one of those things. It's like cheap is expensive. You don't want to pay the cheapest price. You're probably going to end up with the cheapest quality. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you have to weigh up those factors. Like, how good is your factory? How good is the relationship? Like, we love working with that factory.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, do we love working with that factory 50% more than market price? No. 20% more, sure. It's like you have to weigh up that stuff.
Yeah. And then, hitting on that, it's like listing out the qualities that you're looking for specifically in the factory, and then comparing the price to those qualities and how well is their sample, how well is their communication, how good was either your visit or your sourcing agent's visit to them. And then I guess the one thing is like, let's reverse the strategy. For example, I know that we've talked before about trying to establish a long-term relationship, a long-term working relationship with the factory. Do you think that this strategy would maybe work better where, let's say, I want 2 RMB per unit, they're hitting me with 2.5 last minute, and then coming in middle ground, like, you know what, we actually, like, you promised us 2 before. Now you're changing it up to 2.5 due to factors like labor or some sort of environmental tax that, although understandable, you're putting all that burden on us and it's not fair. How about because we want to work with you and we don't want a nickel and dime over this, how about we meet in the middle, like 2.25, and that way we're not squeezing you to like the very last RMB, and also, you're taking we're giving you like a fair kind of bump, even though you're giving us way more, we're paying way more than we expected to on this product. So that we can work further together. So like giving them a little bit of leeway to charge you a little bit more, but also like drawing the line of like, I'm expecting this not to happen again in the future.
Yeah, I think that's one way to do it. Maybe getting some other concessions out of the order in return for you paying a higher price. Maybe they give you some better packaging material, or like we were talking about before, instead of the 50% of waiting until 50% is done, they allow us to come in and do a QC at 20%, something like that. One thing that I remember saying to you as well, if they bump up that price, there's also the option of saying, okay, well, let's write a contract, let's come to an agreement that I'll pay you that price as long as you're hitting the deadlines. I'm comfortable with these prices as long as you're meeting your time requirements, because that's super important. If you're getting a lower price but it's going to take 2.5 months longer to produce it, that might not be worth a few extra $100 or $1,000 that you might be paying on top. So giving them some incentive that, no problem, I'll give you that extra money, but only if you're hitting it in the 20-day period that you said that you would.
And also the quality requirements, because that's what I was saying to you before, is like, if they go down on the price and then you start talking about quality, and then they'll go like, well, if you want this quality, we need to raise the price anyways. You know what I mean? So it's like they might just use something else as an excuse to raise the price again. So what I would do is, like Mike said, concessions, one of those being quality, being like, I'm okay with this price as long as you hit this timeline, as long as you hit these quality points that I've listed out here, and then that's it. And if you don't, then this is what's going to happen.
Yeah. Okay, so just to recap, so originally they raised the price, find out why exactly, try to tap them for all the details, try maybe think about taking a strategy of if everything else is good in terms of their quality, their production, their responsiveness, their agreement to do QC, which I know a lot of factories don't want to do. Maybe find like a middle ground between like, okay, I'll allow a partial raise rather than a full raise and try to play in that middle ground. Sign the contracts, sales agreement in terms of like the price, maybe even the yearly price, and then the QC agreement. And then make a statement that this is not okay to be doing it further on, like, later on, just like constantly raising the price over and over and over again. Did I miss anything?
No, I think it's fine.
All right, I think we're good here. I will be updating you guys how that goes in early March.